Victor Frankenstein grew up in a loving family in Geneva, Switzerland. His father, Alphonse Frankenstein, was a kind and respected man, and his mother, Caroline, was gentle and charitable. From a young age, Victor was a curious and bright boy. He had an adopted sister named Elizabeth, who was raised by the Frankenstein family after her own parents died. Elizabeth was a sweet and graceful girl, and Victor loved her dearly. They were best friends throughout childhood. They often walked together in the gardens and along the lake, talking about their dreams. Victor also had a close friend named Henry Clerval, a cheerful and adventurous boy who loved stories of knights and heroes. The three children grew up happily, surrounded by love and learning. As a child, Victor was fascinated by the natural world. He collected rocks and insects, watched lightning during thunderstorms with wonder, and read every book he could find about science and even old alchemy. One day, when Victor was about 13, he discovered an ancient book by a scientist who spoke of magic and secret knowledge. The young Victor was captivated. He dreamed of discovering hidden truths and unlocking the mysteries of nature. Sometimes, he imagined ending illness and even conquering death itself. These grand ideas excited him and took root in his mind. When Victor was 17, his parents decided it was time for him to attend university. He was to study at the esteemed University of Ingolstadt in Germany. But just before he was to leave, tragedy struck the Frankenstein family. Victor's mother, Caroline, fell ill with a deadly fever. She had caught the illness while caring for a poor sick girl. Caroline grew weaker each day. On her deathbed, she called Victor and Elizabeth to her side. "My dear children," she whispered softly, "I am happy that I leave you both in each other's care. Elizabeth, you have brought so much joy to our family. And Victor, my son, I know you will make us proud. One day, I hope you two will marry and live a happy life." Victor and Elizabeth wept and promised to care for one another. With a gentle smile, Caroline Frankenstein passed away, leaving her family in grief. Victor felt as if an icy hand had seized his heart. He had never experienced such pain before. Despite this terrible loss, Victor honored his mother's wish and departed for Ingolstadt to continue his education. His father and Elizabeth encouraged him to do well and to write often. "We will miss you dearly. Please take care of yourself," Elizabeth said as she bid him farewell. His father added, "Your mother wanted this for you, Victor. She believed you would do great things. Make us proud, son." With those words in his mind and tears in his eyes, Victor left his home. Life at Ingolstadt was initially challenging for Victor. He found himself alone in a new city, far from the comfort of his family and friends. But he soon threw himself into his studies. The university brimmed with new ideas and learned professors. Victor studied chemistry, biology, and other sciences with passionate dedication. One of his professors, the stern Professor Krempe, dismissed Victor's earlier interest in ancient alchemy as foolish, which embarrassed Victor but also pushed him to learn the modern sciences more thoroughly. Another teacher, Professor Waldman, was kinder and recognized Victor's potential. Under these mentors, Victor's knowledge grew rapidly. He worked harder than any other student, often astonishing his professors with his insight and determination. Yet even as Victor mastered the latest scientific techniques, he never forgot his old dream to discover the very secret of life. How, exactly, did life begin? What made something alive versus just a collection of body parts? Could the spark of life be harnessed and used to animate the non-living? These questions consumed Victor's thoughts. He became obsessed with the idea of creating life from lifeless matter. It seemed daring and dangerous, but Victor's ambition only burned brighter at the thought of achieving what no scientist ever had. Quietly, Victor began to conduct unusual experiments. He studied the decay of living beings, examining how bodies broke down after death. Often at night, he went to graveyards and mortuaries to observe the dead and collect bones and tissues for study. It was grim, horrible work. Being surrounded by death made him shudder, but he pressed on, driven by a feverish curiosity. Through these experiments, Victor believed he made a groundbreaking discovery. He thought he had found the spark that could create life. Exactly what it was he never revealed, but he became sure that he could apply this knowledge to build a living being from scratch. The prospect of such a creation thrilled Victor. In his imagination, he saw himself as a benefactor to mankind, perhaps even as a kind of god. A new species would bless me as its creator, Victor thought. If he could make a human-like creature, it might be stronger and healthier than ordinary people, free from disease. Such a being might thank him and honor him like a father. With these grand ambitions, Victor set to work on his great experiment in secret. Victor isolated himself in an apartment at the top of an old house in Ingolstadt. This attic space became his laboratory. He kept his project hidden from his professors and friends, knowing they would likely be horrified or think him mad. Late at night, by the flicker of candlelight, Victor scoured charnel houses and dissecting rooms for materials. He collected bones, muscles, and organs from the deceased. He pieced together a body, selecting what he thought were beautiful or strong parts. Because delicate work was difficult at tiny scale, he decided to make the creature large, about 8 feet tall, hoping this would simplify the process of working with minute structures. Months passed as Victor labored in secrecy. He became so absorbed in his work that he hardly ate or slept. His cheeks grew pale and hollow. His eyes were feverish and wild. He paid no attention to letters from his family or to the changing seasons outside. His entire world narrowed to the dark room and the things slowly taking shape upon his work table. Even as he suffered exhaustion and horror at some of the gruesome tasks, he refused to stop. The thought of the moment of creation, the moment his creation would open its eyes and life sustained him like a dark, burning flame. Finally, on a dreary November night, Victor Frankenstein completed his task. Rain pattered against the window panes, and a candle cast long shadows in the laboratory. The creature lay before him, on the tablet, a giant, humanoid figure wrapped loosely in cloth. Victor's heart pounded as he prepared the final step. He had fashioned this being from assorted body parts, painstakingly connected and sewn together. Now he believed he knew how to spark life within it. With trembling hands, Victor initiated the mysterious process. He leaned in close, his breath quick and shallow, watching for any sign of life. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the creature's chest gave a heavy and uneasy, ragged breath. Its limbs twitched. Victor froze, scarcely breathing himself. Slowly, the creature's dull, yellow eye opened and stared up at the ceiling. "It's alive," Victor whispered in shock. He had achieved his goal. He had created life from death. But in that instant of triumph, Victor felt only horror. The creature he had built was alive, yes, but it was monstrous to behold. Victor had tried to make it beautiful, selecting each feature for its attractiveness. Yet, assembled together, the features looked grotesque. The creature's skin was yellowish and stretched tightly over its body, barely hiding the muscles and blood vessels beneath. Its hair was a lustrous black, and its teeth were white, but these fine attributes only made the contrast with its watery, pale eyes and sunken face more horrifying. The creature blinked and slowly turned its head, looking at Victor. It opened its mouth and made a garbled sound, a sort of mutter or moan. Victor's blood ran cold. Panic seized him. This thing was looking at him, reaching an arm toward him as if to ask for help. Its movements were awkward and uncoordinated, like those of a newborn infant in a giant's body. Victor could not bear it. "What have I done?" he gasped. Overwhelmed by fear and disgust, Victor fled. He stumbled out of the laboratory and down the stairs, rushing out into the stormy night. Outside, Victor paced in the courtyard under the pouring rain, his mind in turmoil. He half expected the monster to be lumbering after him, but it had not followed. He spent the entire night outside in the howling wind, too afraid to return or to think clearly. Only at the break of dawn, when the gray light of morning crept over the streets, did Victor dare to go back to his room. Heart-pounding, he crept up the stairs and opened the door to the lab. The room was empty. The creature was gone. Seeing the vacant table and the open window, Victor felt a wave of dizzy relief. The monstrous monster had escaped. He prayed it would simply vanish forever and release him from what he had done. Exhausted and emotionally shattered, Victor collapsed onto his bed in a feverish faint. Some hours later, after sunrise, Victor woke to the sound of a familiar, cheerful voice. It was Henry Clerval, his best friend, who had just arrived in Ingolstadt. Henry had convinced his father to let him also attend the university and had come to surprise Victor. He entered Victor's apartment to find a frightening scene. Victor, pale as a ghost, was trembling and ill, the laboratory in disarray, and no one else around. Henry was alarmed. Victor was overjoyed to see Henry, but as soon as he stood to greet him, a great sickness overwhelmed him. The horror and stress of recent events had been too great. Victor fell into a delirious fever. For many weeks, Victor was terribly ill with what we might call a nervous breakdown. He drifted in and out of consciousness, often raving about the monster and giving Henry the impression that some terrible nightmare haunted him. Henry cared for Victor devotedly during this time. He brought in a doctor, gave Victor his medicines, and sat by his bedside day and night. Slowly, under Henry's watch and the gentle arrival of spring, Victor recovered. When his fever finally broke and his mind cleared, he realized with gratitude that his friend had saved him. He was weak and shattered, but alive. With the burden of the creature's immediate presence lifted, for there was no sign of the monster anywhere, Victor tried to return to a normal life. Henry gave him a bundle of letters from home, which had piled up while Victor was ill. Reading the loving words from his father and from Elizabeth, who wrote to say how much she missed him, Victor felt deep remorse for having isolated himself so completely. He also felt stirrings of hope, and Happy Neshi's family still cared for him dearly, and Henry was by his side. For a short time, as summer arrived, Victor's life seemed to return to normal. He and Henry took walks in the sunshine, visited professors, though Victor avoided his former laboratory, and Victor felt the shadow on his heart slowly beginning to lift. This peace was not to last. One morning, a letter arrived from Victor's father in Geneva. As Victor read it, his hands began to tremble, and he turned pale. The letter brought dreadful news. Victor's youngest brother, sweet little William, had been murdered. Alphonse Frankenstein's letter was filled with anguish. He explained that William, just a boy of about 6 years old, had gone missing one evening from the grounds of their estate. After an all-night search, the family found William's body in the woods. He had been strangled. Alphonse wrote that their entire household was in despair. Elizabeth, in particular, was overcome with guilt and sorrow, for she felt she should have protected William. The letter implored Victor to return home at once in this time of need. Victor read this in shock, crying out in grief. Little William, the playful, laughing child he had last seen 2 years ago, was dead murdered. Henry, seeing Victor's distress, quickly learned of the tragedy and helped Victor prepare for the journey back to Geneva. But as Victor packed, a terrible thought took hold of him. The manner of William's death, strangulation, struck Victor like a bolt of lightning. He remembered the powerful hands of his creature and the way it had reached out to him. Could it be? Could the monster have killed William? At first, Victor tried to dismiss the idea as impossible. How would the creature even find his family? But the more he thought about it, the more likely it seemed. The monster had disappeared. William's murderer was unknown and strong enough to kill a small child, and the crime was senseless unless it was meant to hurt the Frankensteins. Victor's heart filled with dread. He did not share these suspicions with Henry, but the knowledge gnawed at him. It was a long journey home to Geneva. Victor was agitated and impatient the entire way, haunted by guilt and fear. Heavy rains delayed them, and by the time Victor neared Geneva, night had fallen. The city gates were already closed, so Victor decided to go the rest of the way to his family's house on foot, taking a path around the lake. He left Henry in a nearby village inn and set off alone in the dark. The night was stormy. Thunder rumbled in the distance as Victor walked through familiar woods and fields. His path led near the very spot where William's body had been found. As Victor passed that somber place, a flash of lightning suddenly illuminated the sky. In that brilliant moment, Victor saw a large black outline of a figure standing among the trees. The figure was gigantic, and misshapen there was no doubt in Victor's mind. It was the creature lurking near the scene of the crime. Before Victor could react, the figure darted away with inhuman speed, climbing over a rock wall and disappearing into the dark storm. Victor was filled with horror and rage. His worst fear was confirmed. The monster he had created was William's murderer. Sick with grief and anger, Victor continued home, the storm raging above, his thoughts a blur of self-reproach. He knew that he had unleashed this fiend upon his own family. How could he ever confess this secret? Who would even believe him? He decided he must keep silent to avoid being deemed insane. Yet he vowed inwardly that somehow he would make the creature pay if he could. When Victor arrived at his family home, dawn was breaking. The reunion was heartbreaking. His father embraced him with tears, and Elizabeth fell into Victor's arms, sobbing. The household was steeped in mourning. They all proceeded to tell Victor what had happened in more detail. As if William's death were not tragedy enough, an innocent person had been accused of the murder, Justine Moritz, their young housekeeper and dear family friend. Victor was shocked. Justine had been like a member of the family since childhood. How could anyone think she would harm William? Elizabeth insisted vehemently that Justine was innocent, but explained that there was strong evidence against her. On the night of the murder, William had been wearing a locket gold pendant with a portrait of Caroline Frankenstein inside. After William's body was found, that locket was missing. Later, the locket was discovered in Justine's pocket. She had been out looking for William that night and claimed she had no idea how the locket got there. Nevertheless, local officials found it suspicious that the locket was with her, and since she had no good explanation, they arrested Justine for the murder. Victor immediately understood what had happened. The creature must have killed William and taken the locket, then cleverly planted it on Justine to frame her. It was exactly the kind of cruel, calculated misery that Victor's creation would inflict. Victor was tormented by this knowledge, another innocent person suffering because of his actions. But what could he do? If he told the truth, no one would believe that a monster killed the boy and framed the maid. In fact, they might think Victor himself was mad, or even the murderer. The trial of Justine took place soon after. Despite the lack of any motive, why would gentle Justine kill a child she loved? The damning evidence of the locket swayed the court. Victor, Elizabeth, and the entire Frankenstein family testified to Justine's goodness and upright character. Elizabeth, passionate and tearful, spoke directly in court. "I know Justine, and I know she could never do this horrible thing. She has been an angel to our family and loved William as we all did." Many in the courtroom were moved by Elizabeth's words. Justine herself, calm but sorrowful, maintained her innocence. But under pressure and the weight of circumstantial evidence, poor Justine was found guilty. In the end, she even gave a confused confession, prompted by fear of eternal damnation, thinking it might save her soul even if it couldn't save her life. Justine was condemned to death. Victor's heart broke as he realized that this was the creature's doing, and indirectly, his doing. Elizabeth was devastated, crying that the world had grown cruel and unjust. In Justine's final moments, Elizabeth and Victor visited her in prison. They found her pale but composed. "I am not afraid to die," Justine said softly. "I am innocent in the eyes of God, and I will join little William in heaven. Please, Elizabeth, do not weep for me. I know you have always been my friend." Elizabeth sobbed and embraced Justine through the cell bars, promising that none of them would ever forget her goodness. Victor stood in the shadows, choking on guilt. He wanted to scream out that he was the cause of all this misery, but he was too cowardly and too afraid of the consequences. All he could do was silently pray for forgiveness that he felt he did not deserve. The next day, Justine was executed. The Frankenstein family was crushed under a double grief. Victor's father sank into despair at the loss of William and the tragedy of Justine. Elizabeth's spirit was utterly broken. She had lost a beloved little brother and a dear friend, and her faith in justice was badly shaken. As for Victor, his soul was a storm of agony. Rage toward the creature, guilt for creating it, and the pain of losing two innocent lives racked him day and night. He could find no peace at home. Every corner of the house reminded him of those who were gone. He often caught Elizabeth watching him with concern, for he paced the halls like a man possessed. To everyone's surprise, Victor suggested that he needed to go away for a while, to travel and clear his overburdened heart. His father agreed that some time in the mountains might help Victor's spirits. Elizabeth, though sad to see him go so soon after returning, understood that Victor was struggling with deep sorrow. Thus, Victor set off to the Swiss Alps, seeking solace in nature. He journeyed to the valley of Chamonix, a place he had loved in childhood for its sublime mountains and glaciers. Alone, he climbed high into the snow-covered peaks. The natural beauty around him was magnificent, the shining white of the glaciers, the dark pines below, the blue sky above. For a few moments, the grandeur of nature calmed Victor's tormented mind. He felt almost at peace as he gazed at the mighty Mont Blanc, the highest mountain, its summit lost in the clouds. One day, Victor hiked up to a glacier called Montagne Verte, hoping the exertion and crisp air would clear his mind. The glacier was a broad river of ice, winding through steep mountains. Victor stood on the sea of ice, listening to the wind whistle through the crags. He shouted into the vast, empty silence, letting out some of his anguish. "Why did this happen? William, Justine, forgive me." His voice echoed off the icy cliffs. To his shock, another voice answered from behind him, a deep, rumbling voice that echoed in the silence. "Victor." He spun around. Advancing across the ice was the creature. Its gigantic form moved with a swift, unearthly grace over the frozen terrain. Victor's blood ran cold, then boiled with hatred. Here, before him, was the being that had murdered his brother and caused Justine's death. "Devil," Victor hissed through clenched teeth. He wished he had a weapon. With bare hands he launched himself at the creature. "How dare you approach me?" he shouted. Rage and anguish contorted his face. He picked up a sharp chunk of ice, holding it like a dagger. "I'll kill you myself, you monster." The creature halted a few yards away. It did not spring to attack or flee. Instead, it regarded Victor with a sad, almost pleading expression. This surprised Victor and gave him pause. The creature then spoke, and its words were not the growl of an animal, but clear and articulate. "I expected this reception," it said. "All men hate the wretched. How then must I be hated, who am the most miserable of all living things?" Victor was stunned for a moment at the creature's ability to speak, and not only speak, but speak intelligently. This was not a mindless monster. It could reason and express feelings. That realization made Victor uneasy. but his fury was unabated. "You dare talk to me?" he cried. "You, who have murdered my loved ones? Wretch, do not call yourself miserable. You have no right to live after what you've done." He lunged forward in rage. The creature easily evaded Victor's rushed attack. Victor stumbled on the slippery ice. The creature still did not strike back. "I am miserable," it said calmly, its voice heavy with sorrow. "Believe me, I did not want to harm anyone. I was benevolent once, my heart full of love. Misery made me a fiend. If you knew what I have suffered, you might feel pity for me." "Never," Victor spat, regaining his footing. His mind was a whirlwind of emotions. Part of him could hardly comprehend that this being was speaking, arguing its case. Another part of him only remembered little William's cold body and Justine's execution. "You deserve no pity," he growled. "You've destroyed everything I cared about." "I have done dreadful things," the creature admitted, "but it is the result of desperation and loneliness. I was born good, and misery drove me to evil. I swear, I never wanted to live a life of hate." The creature looked around at the icy, barren landscape. "I see you come here seeking peace, Victor. There was a time I sought peace too, in nature, but I found none. I was cast out by humanity. If you kill me now, you will only satisfy your rage for a moment. But listen, you owe me at least a hearing. You made me. I'm your creature, your responsibility. I have suffered more than anyone. All I ask is that you listen to what I have to say. If, after hearing me, you still wish to destroy me, I won't fight you. I'll accept my fate." Victor hesitated. The ice shard trembled in his hand. Could it be true that this being had once been kind? Could Victor really owe anything to the monster he loathed? And yet, the creature's words were not those of a mindless demon. They were thoughtful, charged with emotion. Also, Victor could not deny that he had created this life. If it truly had a tragic story, perhaps he should hear it. "I will listen," Victor said harshly, "but do not expect forgiveness. Your crimes cannot be washed away by words." The creature nodded and seemed to sigh with relief. It pointed toward the jagged slopes bordering the glacier. "Let us go to that hut on the mountainside," it said, indicating a small shepherd's cottage in the distance, long abandoned. "We can find shelter there from the biting wind while I tell you my tale." Wary but curious, Victor followed the creature. They walked across the ice, then climbed a rocky path to the ramshackle hut. Inside, the walls kept out the wind, and the creature had even lit a small fire of wood it must have carried here earlier. Victor stood near the entrance, never letting his guard down. The creature settled by the fire, its enormous frame huddled in the little space, and looked up at Victor with an expression of deep sadness. In a trembling voice, the creature described his first moments of life. He awoke in darkness, cold and confused, unable to see or move well. He reached out for some sign of warmth or comfort, but his creator was gone. "Victor, you had fled and left me utterly alone in that apartment." Terrified and disoriented, I eventually stumbled out of the laboratory into the chill night. Outside in the wide world, I faced constant hardship, the creature continued. I remember the night air was cold and the darkness strange. I wandered through forests, shivering and aching with hunger. I drank from streams and ate whatever berries I could find to survive. One day, I discovered an abandoned campfire in the woods. Its warmth drew me in, and I learned to keep the fire alive by adding wood. The fire became precious. To mate gave light and heat in the lonely darkness, though I burned myself at first when I foolishly touched the flames. That pain taught me caution. As I journeyed, I soon learned how others would treat me. Whenever I tried to approach human beings, hoping for kindness, I was met with horror. I remember entering a simple hut, only to have the old man inside scream and run away at the sight of me. In a village, I ventured to find food, but the moment the people saw me, they shouted and threw stones. One even fired a gun. A bullet grazed me, and villagers chased me out, calling me evil names. Wounded and heartbroken, I realized that to human eyes, I was a monster. No one would ever welcome me. That was a bitter lesson in my early days. I was horribly alone. Eventually, after weeks of wandering, I came upon a small cottage in a secluded forest. Inside lived a family of blind old man and his 2 grown children, a son and daughter. By observing them from a hidden spot, a lean-to shed attached to the cottage, I discovered that, although they were poor, they were very good people. The son, Felix, and the daughter, Agatha, worked hard to care for their blind father. They had very little food, and often Felix seemed sad, yet they were unfailingly kind to one another. Watching them, I felt the first warmth in my heart since my creation. I longed to join them, to somehow be a part of their life and kindness. I knew I couldn't reveal myself right away. I was too afraid of their reaction. So I hid in that shed, out of sight, and for many weeks I observed them quietly. In the evenings, when the family sat together, I listened to them speak and began to learn their language. At night, while they slept, I did small chores for them in secret. I gathered firewood and cleared snow from their path. In the mornings, I often saw Felix's puzzled face when he noticed the woodpile mysteriously replenished, but it made their lives a little easier, and that secretly made me happy. Over time, I became like a silent member of their household, always near but never seen. My understanding of their language grew day by day. I found a few tattered books and taught myself to read as well. From reading and from listening to the family's conversations, I learned about the wider world, about human feelings, about God and morality, and about the simple joys people share. The more I learned, the more I realized how different my situation was. I had no family, no friends, no name, nothing. The ache of my loneliness was almost unbearable. Still, the goodness and gentle nature of the family gave me hope. I imagined that if I could find the courage to introduce myself to them, they might look beyond my outward appearance and see the soul within that only wanted love and friendship. I waited for the right moment. Finally, one day, an opportunity came. The blind old father, whom I had come to adore for his gentle music and kind words to his children, was alone in the cottage. Felix and Agatha had gone into town on an errand. I gathered up all my courage and knocked on the cottage door. The old man invited me in, thinking I was some traveler seeking shelter. Because he was blind, he did not see how I looked. He sensed only my trembling voice and my respectful manner. I told him, in a disguised, low voice, that I was a weary traveler in need of a little rest and warmth. He welcomed me. We sat together, and he even offered me a small portion of food. My heart was overflowing. I cannot describe to you, Victor, how it felt to be treated with kindness, like a normal human, after all the abuse I had suffered. I told the old man that I had friends, meaning his family, who did not know me yet, but whom I deeply wished to meet and be accepted by. The old man kindly said, "If they are good people, they will welcome you once they know you. I, for one, am happy to have you here, friend." He called me friend Victor. Those gentle words brought tears to my eyes. But at that moment, our peace was shattered. Felix, Agatha, and a young woman named Safi, a family friend who lived with them, returned earlier than expected. The moment they entered the cottage, their eyes fell on me. A large, frightening stranger crouched at their father's feet. The women screamed. Felix, thinking his father was being attacked, lunged at me with a stick. He struck me violently. I cried out that I meant no harm, but Felix continued to hit me and pull the old man away to protect him. In the chaos, blind Mr. DeLacy shouted in confusion, trying to understand what was happening, but no one listened. I was overcome with despair. My dream of finding friendship was collapsing around me. Rather than strike back at Felix, I could have easily hurt or even killed him, but I would never do that to my beloved family. I fled from the cottage, battered in body and soul. I spent that night in the woods near the cottage, utterly miserable. I cannot convey to you the despair I felt, Victor. I knew in my heart that I had been truly kind and gentle with those people, and yet, the instant they saw me, they thought I was a beast and drove me away with violence. By morning, I gathered the courage to creep back to the cottage, hoping to speak to the old man again. Perhaps, if I could explain myself to Felix and Agatha in daylight, they might relent. But to my utter heartbreak, I found the cottage empty. Peering through a window, I saw that their few belongings were gone. Later, I learned they had fled, permanently, because of me. They were so frightened by my appearance in the incident that they left that very day, determined never to return. Victor, the creature said, looking up at him with anguish. That was the moment when all the goodness in me turned to bitterness. I had nurtured nothing but love and hope toward those people, and in return I was beaten and cast out. I felt rage like never before. In a fever of anger, I set fire to their cottage. I watched it burn until it collapsed, the flames consuming the only place where I had ever felt a glimpse of happiness. I know it was wrong, but grief and fury overwhelmed my heart. After the cottage burned, I fled. By then, I knew from your journal, which I had found in your coat pocket back in your laboratory, where I might find you, my creator. I had pieced together details of your name and home. With nothing left to lose and a fire of vengeance in my heart, I decided to travel to Geneva to find you. I had a single purpose, to make you face the suffering you had caused me. The journey to Geneva was long and arduous. I traveled mostly at night to avoid people, crossing mountains and forests, enduring thirst, hunger, and extreme cold and heat. I was sustained by the burning anger inside me and by a kind of twisted hope that somehow meeting you, face to face, I could demand that you account for what you'd done. Yet, I will admit, even then, a part of me still longed for kindness. I was lonely, terribly lonely, and hurt. I imagined that if, by some miracle, you felt pity and helped me, I could yet be saved from my misery. On my journey, I even tried once more to do a good deed. I recall coming across a young girl running along the edge of a swift river. She slipped and fell in, and the water was carrying her away. She was drowning. I did not hesitate. I rushed into the river and pulled her out. I dragged her to the shore and was reviving her when a man, who I believe was her father or guardian, arrived. Instead of thanking me, he thought I was attacking her. He tore the girl from my arms, and when I tried to explain, he shot me with a pistol. The bullet wounded my shoulder, and the man fled with the unconscious girl, shouting for help. Can you imagine, Victor? I saved a child's life, and in return, I was treated like a monster yet again. This incident drove home a cruel truth. No matter how I acted, humans would only ever see a frightful beast. At that moment, wounded and in pain, I swore hatred and vengeance against humanity. I gave up any remaining thoughts of being kind, since no matter what I did, I was met with cruelty. Eventually, I reached Geneva. By that time, I was filled with anger and a desire to make you, my creator, suffer as I suffered. But fate placed another opportunity in my path that I deeply regret, yet one I cannot erase. One evening, I came upon a beautiful child in a park outside the city, a little boy who was playing alone. I thought, this child is still innocent. Perhaps he will not fear me, since he's too young to have learned prejudice. I approached him gently, intending perhaps to take him and educate him as a companion, or simply to interact without the immediate rejection I faced with adults. But the boy panicked as soon as he saw me. He screamed and struggled. In trying to quiet him, I inadvertently revealed I knew Frankenstein, for he yelled that his father was M. Frankenstein. At the sound of that cursed name and the child's frightened insults, he called me an ogre, a monster. Something in me snapped. In my rage, I seized the boy, and, tragically, I ended up choking the life out of him. It was not premeditated. I acted in a moment of blind fury, and when I realized William was dead, I was horrified at what I had done. Despair and remorse flooded me. But then I thought of you. This boy was your brother. In killing him, I knew I had inflicted pain on you, my creator. The knowledge gave me a bitter satisfaction for a brief moment, though it was quickly followed by more misery. As I stood there over William's body, I noticed he wore a locket around his neck. Inside it was a portrait of a lovely woman. Her face was gentle and kind. I imagined that this was your mother, someone who had been kind and loving. It made me think again of how I had never known such kindness. I pocketed the locket without much reason perhaps. I thought to keep a token of a world that would never accept me. As I wandered, I found a small barn near the city. Inside, a young woman was sleeping. She was Justine, though I did not know her name. I realized from her attire that she worked for a family, perhaps even yours. An idea formed in my mind. I would frame this girl for the boy's murder. Yes, it was a wicked idea, one born from my anger at the world and at you. I slipped the locket into the folds of her dress as she slept. I hoped that she would be blamed, and that this would further hurt the Frankensteins. It was an evil act, and I knew it. And so, William died by my hands, and Justine was later accused and executed indirectly, also because of me. I have no excuse for these crimes, Victor, except that I was at the end of my hope. Every door had been shut in my face. I wanted you to feel a taste of the despair I felt, and you did feel it. Now, I see your face, and know that you hate me more than ever, continued the creature, looking at Victor, whose face indeed showed agony and revulsion. Yet I ask you, who is more to blame? I, who was cast away and became vengeful only after being endlessly abused, or you, who created a being only to abandon it out of fear and horror, leaving it no guidance but pain? Victor sat silently, tears in his eyes. He was at a loss for words. Everything the creature said was true, from a certain point of view. William and Justine were dead because of the creature's actions, but if Victor had not made the creature, or if he had cared for it at the beginning, maybe none of this would have happened. Victor felt a terrible weight of guilt coupled with hatred. He buried his face in his hands, overwhelmed. The creature saw Victor's anguish and spoke more softly. I am not asking for your forgiveness, it said. I know my crimes are horrible. I have become a thing that men call evil. But I swear to you, I was not born an evil creature. I began with love in my heart. If I had experienced even a bit of the kindness that you and your family show each other, I would have been gentle and grateful. Misery made me a fiend. I have realized that no being should live in the loneliness I have endured. You made me, and your responsibility toward me remains. Victor, trembling, looked up at the creature. What do you want from me? He muttered. I want you to fix what you have done, the creature replied firmly. I am alone and miserable. You, Victor Frankenstein, owe me a chance at happiness. You must create a companion for me, another being, just as grotesque as I am, who can understand me and share my life. It is the only kindness you can give me. I cannot live among humans, so I need someone of my own kind to live with, to love and be loved by. I am asking for a female creature, as hideous as myself. In return, I promise this. If you grant my wish, we will leave Europe forever. We will go to the deepest wilds of South America, or some remote place. We will harm no one. You will never see us again. I will make sure to avoid all humans. I will disappear from your life and from the lives of everyone you know. The creature's voice grew more intense. However, if you refuse my demand, I will keep my promise of vengeance. I will be with you on your darkest days. I will make you curse the very day you were born. Shall I leave misery alone? No. If I cannot inspire love, then I will cause fear, and especially I will seek revenge on you, my creator, who doomed me to this life. Victor was silent for a long time. His mind was a battlefield of conflicting thoughts. To agree to the creature's request would mean diving once more into that filthy work he had sworn never to repeat. It meant creating a second being as terrifying as the first. The very thought made him feel sick and terrified. What if the new creature turned out as violent or even more dangerous? What if the two creatures, instead of living peacefully in exile, decided to wreak twice the havoc? The possibilities were dreadful. On the other hand, looking at the creature now, Victor felt a reluctant stir of pity. This wretched being had suffered terribly. Victor knew that in part, it was indeed his fault for abandoning his creation. The creature's promised self-exile, if trustworthy, could mean that no one else would ever be harmed. It might be the only way to protect his family and others from the creature's wrath. And there was that ominous threat: if you refuse, I will make you suffer for the rest of your life. Victor believed that completely. The creature had proven its ability to carry out horrible revenge. Finally, Victor gave a heavy sigh. In a low, strained voice, he said, "I will do it. I will create for you a companion." The creature's face transformed. An expression of astonished joy spread over it. "You have given me hope," it murmured. "And I swear by the sun, by the blue sky of heaven, and by all the life that I hold dear, that if you keep your promise, you will never see me again. I will take my mate, and we will vanish into the wilderness, far from human society." Victor grimaced, still horrified at what he was agreeing to. "It will take time," he warned. "Months, perhaps. I must travel and gather parts. And I refuse to do it here, in this place where my family lives. He could hardly speak the words, feeling sick at the prospect of repeating his horrific experiment. "I understand," said the creature. "I am not asking for instant results, but I will be watching you, Frankenstein. Do not forget your promise, and do not delay it on purpose. If you break your word, remember, you will have me as your enemy forever." Victor shuddered at the implicit threat. "I intend to keep my word," he replied. The creature's tense posture relaxed slightly. It almost smiled, though its grim features made the smile uncanny. "Thank you," it said simply. "Thank you for my future bride, and for a chance at a life that is not completely lonely." Victor said nothing, feeling more dread than gratitude. Outside the hut, the storm had passed. The creature stepped to the doorway. Before leaving, it turned once more to Victor. In a soft voice, it said, "I will leave you now. In some weeks, I shall check on your progress." Then, eerily addressing Victor, as if he were a revered figure, the creature added, "You are my creator and my master. Keep your promise, and all will be well. But if you break it, remember what I have said." With that, the creature bounded out of the hut and into the wilderness. In the blink of an eye, it was gone, moving with that inhuman speed over the ice and rocks. Its great form soon lost among the boulders and snow. Victor staggered out of the hut sometime later, weak and trembling. He felt as though he had made a pact with the devil. On the one hand, a burden was lifted. His family might now be safe if he fulfilled his promise. On the other hand, he had just agreed to create another monster, which went against every instinct in him. His mind reeled with fear at what he must now do. After resting a little and gathering his strength, Victor descended the mountain and returned to Geneva. Back in Geneva, Victor concealed the true reason for his journey to the Alps, but his family could see that something was changed in him. He was extremely uneasy and restless. The deaths of William and Justine were still fresh wounds, and now Victor often paced alone, muttering to himself as he wrestled with the horror of the new task ahead. Elizabeth and his father tried to engage him in family activities, but Victor was distant. He realized he could not begin his work in Geneva under his family's watchful eyes, nor did he wish to bring any more horror near them. He needed to be away and to have resources and privacy to fulfill his promise. Victor told his father that traveling would benefit his health and state of mind. He expressed a desire to visit England, where some famous scientists lived, whose knowledge might prove helpful to his current scientific interests. Alphonse, hoping a change of scene might indeed help Victor recover from their recent tragedies, agreed. It was arranged that Victor would travel for a few months. Much to Victor's relief, Henry Clerval would accompany him, at least for the first part of the journey. Henry, always adventurous and now free to pursue his own studies, was delighted at the prospect of seeing England and perhaps other parts of Europe. Victor and Henry left Geneva in the autumn and journeyed to England. Though Henry was thrilled by the beautiful scenery they encountered and by meetings with learned men in London and other cities, Victor remained anxious and preoccupied. England's scientific advancements were indeed interesting to him, but only insofar as he thought they might assist his dark project. All the while, the creature's warning, "I will be watching you," rang in his mind. After a few months in England, Victor could wait no longer. He felt the creature's eyes on him, shadowy but persistent, urging him to proceed. Victor parted from Henry, telling his friend that he needed some solitary time to conduct a private research project. Henry, unaware of the real reason, cheerfully agreed and went off to visit some acquaintances in another town, planning to meet Victor again in Scotland later. Meanwhile, Victor traveled north into Scotland and sought out a remote place where he could work undisturbed. Off the coast of Scotland, he found a sparse cluster of islands, the Orkneys, where only a few fishermen lived. On one of the smallest, most desolate islands, he rented a crude one-room hut. The area was dreary and barren, the sea winds howled day and night. But its isolation suited Victor's purpose perfectly. No prying eyes, no curious neighbors. In that wretched hut, Victor began the dreadful labor of creating a second creature. By now, he was an expert in the process, as loathsome as it was, and he knew what needed to be done. Day after day, under the weak light that came through the hut's single window, Victor toiled. He pieced together organs and limbs, slowly forming the shape of a female. But with every stitch and every moment spent on this gruesome work, Victor's heart grew heavier. Unlike the feverish excitement he felt during his first creation, now he felt only guilt, disgust, and fear. His hands often shook. Sometimes he had to pause and go outside to retch from the horror of what he was handling. What disturbed Victor even more were his own thoughts. He imagined the two creatures, male and female, existing together. Would they truly isolate themselves as promised? The creature had sworn they would hide away from humanity, but what if she, the new creature, refused that plan? She would have her own free will. She might be violent or evil even if the first creature vowed to guide her. They could hate each other, or conversely, they might love each other and bring forth children, an entire race of monsters that could plague mankind. Victor's mind spun with terrifying possibilities. Often, Victor would set aside his work and pace along the rocky shore, questioning the righteousness of what he was doing. One evening, as he sat at his work table, staring at the half-finished female form, a sudden chill ran through him. He had not heard a sound, but he felt he was being watched. He turned toward the window. In the darkness outside, a face pressed against the glass. Two yellow eyes gleamed in the night. Victor's heart stopped. It was the creature, gazing in with a ghastly grin, clearly excited to see his bride taking shape. A surge of anger and panic flooded Victor's chest. That moment, seeing the creature's expectant, hideous face, brought clarity to Victor. He could not go through with this. He would not create a second monster. Who knew what havoc two creatures could wreak? He thought of little William's strangled form, of Justine, of Clerval, and Elizabeth, and his father-all, the people still at risk. In that instant, Victor decided to destroy his work. The creature's eyes widened in confusion as it watched Victor suddenly stand up with a look of resolve. Victor met the creature's gaze through the glass. Then, with a cry of rage, he tore the unfinished female form to pieces. He grabbed a scalpel and cut it apart, ripping the progress of months into shreds of flesh. The head, the limbs he had so carefully assembled, he dismembered them savagely. His laboratory became a scene of carnage. Victor panted and trembled, overcome by a mix of fury and relief at ending this abomination before it began. Outside the window, the creature let out a howl of despair and anger. A moment later, the hut's door was flung open with a crash, and the creature stood on the threshold, quivering with fury. Its eyes blazed, and its teeth were clenched. It took in the destruction before it, the table strewn with gore, Victor standing amidst the ruin of the second creature. "You have destroyed her, my companion, my hope gone," the creature roared. It advanced towards Victor, who shrank back, suddenly fearful again of the being's physical might. The creature's hands curled into fists. "How dare you break your promise?" it snarled. Victor, though afraid, shouted back, "I do dare. I will not create another demon to spread death and misery. I was a fool to agree to it. Leave me. I will never finish that work." The creature stood eerily still for a moment, its body trembling. It fixed Victor with a gaze of pure malevolence. "Remember, I will be with you on your wedding night," it hissed, each word dripping with venom. This was not an idle remark. It was a threat, deadly promise. Then the creature turned and stormed out of the hut, disappearing into the black night and raging wind. Victor collapsed into a chair, shaking. He knew he had just signed his own death warrant or worse. "I will be with you on your wedding night." The creature's words reverberated in his mind. Did it mean to kill him or Elizabeth? What exactly would it do? Victor realized that in that moment of passion, he had thought only of preventing a second monster, but now he had likely turned the existing monster's full wrath upon himself and perhaps upon those he loved. Still, as he looked at the vile remnants on the floor, he felt a grim conviction that he had done the right thing, however dangerous. That night, Victor could not sleep. He gathered the remains of his second, incomplete creation and packed them in a basket weighed down with stones. Past midnight, under a moonless sky, he rowed out alone in a small boat onto the dark sea. He dropped the basket overboard, watching it sink into the black waters, disposing of his ghastly work for good. Victor was exhausted. Feeling sick and overwhelmed, he let the little boat drift. The gentle rocking of the sea and the night's exertions finally brought him into a deep sleep in the bottom of the boat. When he awoke, the sun was already high and the boat was tossing in rough waves. A strong wind had carried him far from the Orkney Island. He realized with alarm that he was lost at sea. All day he fought to control the boat and find land. As evening approached, he finally saw shore in the distance. Battling the surf, he managed to land on a strange beach just as a crowd of locals gathered by the water. It turned out Victor had been blown to the coast of Ireland, but the crowd that greeted him did not do so kindly. As soon as he stumbled ashore, they confronted him, and Victor quickly found himself seized by the local magistrate. A crime had been committed the night before. They said a young man had been found murdered on the beach, and witnesses saw a boat like Victor's in the area. Now Victor's boat appeared, and he matched the vague description of the supposed murderer. Victor, bewildered and still reeling from his ordeal, was taken into custody. When Victor was shown the body of the victim, he was overcome with horror. It was Henry Clerval. His dear friend had been strangled, the black bruises still visible on the neck. Victor understood at once. The creature, in revenge for the destroyed female, must have followed Henry, perhaps mistaking or knowing that Henry was Victor's companion on the journey, and killed him. Here was another beloved person, murdered by the monster's hands, and Victor was now accused of the crime. Upon seeing Henry's lifeless face, Victor fell into a new sickness, raving and insensible. He spent 2 months in an Irish jail, hovering between life and death in a fever, sometimes screaming that he was responsible for the deaths or that a monster was coming for him. The Irish authorities were perplexed by their strange prisoner. Many thought him mad. Fortunately, Mr. Kerwin, the magistrate, took pity on Victor. and also noted that Victor had only just arrived by sea, making it unlikely he could have committed a murder on land the night before. Kerwin wrote to Victor's family, and Alphonse Frankenstein traveled to Ireland to help his son. With his father's support and clear evidence that Victor had been on the Orkney Island at the time of Henry's murder, Victor was exonerated. The Irish court released him, but Henry's death left Victor in shambles. Now Henry Clerval Gentil, good Henry, was gone too, another casualty in the deadly game between Victor and his creation. Victor's spirit was almost entirely broken. Almost. A spark of rage still burned, and Victor vowed to himself that he would never rest until he avenged his friend and family, or died in the attempt. Father and son returned to Geneva. Alphonse, already grieving his younger son, William, was heartbroken to hear of Henry Clerval's death as well, though Victor, of course, did not reveal the truth behind it. He feared greatly for Victor's mental state. Indeed, Victor was extremely fragile and often ill after returning home. Elizabeth tried her best to comfort him. She was still deeply sad herself, but her love for Victor was undiminished. In fact, with all the misfortune that had struck, Elizabeth began to wonder if perhaps Victor had grown distant because he did not truly want to marry her. In a letter, she gently asked him if he had changed his feelings toward her, because if so, she would let him go, despite it breaking her heart. This letter shook Victor out of his gloom momentarily. Change his feelings? Never. He realized that, creature or no creature, he still loved Elizabeth dearly. All his efforts thus far had been, in a way, to protect her and ensure they could have a happy life together. Now that so much had happened, he desired that happiness even more desperately, if it could be attained. So Victor wrote back to Elizabeth, assuring her of his constant love and proposing that they marry as soon as possible. Old Alphonse was delighted with this development. After such dark times, a wedding promised a ray of joy. Elizabeth, though she still sensed a mystery in Victor's behavior, was relieved and agreed. She hoped marriage would heal Victor's troubled mind. Perhaps the creature, lurking in Victor's subconscious, saw this hope too and planned accordingly. Victor, however, could not forget the creature's menacing promise. "I will be with you on your wedding night." He interpreted this as a threat to kill him personally. He even told himself that perhaps it would be a fitting punishment that on the night he finally attained a measure of happiness, the monster would snuff it out by ending his life. At times, Victor almost welcomed this fate, if only it guaranteed the safety of others. But he thought of Elizabeth and could not bear the idea of leaving her a widow on the very day of their marriage, nor the idea of the creature being free to roam if he, Victor, were gone. Therefore, Victor resolved to be on his guard and to fight with all his might when the creature came. He secretly armed himself with pistols and knives. Yet, notably, never once did Victor consider the possibility that the target of the creature's revenge would be someone other than himself. In his anxiety, he assumed the monster's final revenge was to kill Victor, and Victor alone. The wedding day arrived. It was a modest ceremony, given the recent tragedies, but still a poignant and hopeful moment for the Frankenstein family. Elizabeth was radiant in a simple white gown, and though tears of remembrance for William and Justine glistened in her eyes, she smiled lovingly at Victor. Victor tried to match her smile, but his face was grave and taut with anxiety. After the church service, Alphonse and the few close friends who attended congratulated the newlyweds. Everyone hoped that this union would mark a turn toward happiness. That evening, Victor and Elizabeth traveled to a lovely lakeside villa that the Frankenstein family owned, intending to spend their honeymoon night there. The setting was beautiful. The calm lake reflected the moonlight, and the night air was cool and gentle. Yet, as the night deepened, Victor's dread grew. Every rustle of leaves, every whisper of wind made him start. Inside the house, Elizabeth noticed his agitation. She had expected Victor to be joyful, or at least more relaxed now that they were married. Instead, he paced nervously, peering out of windows into the dark. Elizabeth approached him softly. "Dear Victor," she said, "something is troubling you deeply. Ever since you returned from England, you have been carrying a secret sorrow. Please, as your wife, share it with me. We love each other. Nothing you say will change that. Let me help you." Victor took her hands and kissed them, forcing a smile. "Oh, Elizabeth," he replied, "I'm sorry for my behavior. I do have worries, terrible ones, but I cannot explain. I only ask that you trust me. If I seem on edge tonight, it is because I fear something might happen, perhaps to me. But whatever may come, I want you to remember that I love you and treasure every moment with you." Elizabeth was confused and alarmed by these words. "Victor, you frighten me," she said. "Do you think something will happen tonight? Should we call for help or have servants nearby?" "No," Victor said quickly. He did not want others involved. What use would another person be against the monster? They might only get hurt. "Just go to your room and rest, my love. I will keep watch this night. By tomorrow, this will all be behind us." He tried to sound confident. Elizabeth, thinking perhaps Victor was ill or imagining dangers due to stress, agreed to lie down. Elizabeth's bedroom was on the ground floor, with French windows that opened to the gardens. Victor checked the room, thoroughly no sign of forced entry. The night was quiet, save for the gentle lap of lake water on the shore. He gave Elizabeth a kiss on the forehead. "Try to sleep, Elizabeth," he said softly. "Everything will be all right." She nodded and offered him a tentative smile before he left her to rest. Victor then took up a vigil in a small sitting room adjoining the bedroom. He left the door open so he could hear everything in Elizabeth's room. He was armed with a pistol and a dagger. His eyes roamed the shadows of the house. How would the creature come? Through a window? Sneaking in a door? Hours passed. The only sound was the thumping of Victor's heart and the occasional hoot of an owl outside. Just after midnight, a blood-curdling scream tore through the silence. "Elizabeth!" Victor's heart stopped. It was her scream. Then, an inhuman, demonic laughter echoed from the bedroom. Victor burst into the room, too late. In the faint moonlight, he saw Elizabeth lying motionless on the bed, her white dress stained with blood. He rushed to her side with a strangled cry. Elizabeth's eyes were open, but they saw nothing. The love and light that had filled them only hours before were gone, replaced by a glassy emptiness. 2 dark bruises marked her delicate neck, the print of the monster's fingers. She had been strangled, just like William and Justine and Henry. "No, no, no," Victor wailed, shaking Elizabeth's lifeless body gently as if to wake her from a bad dream. But there was no awakening from this nightmare. In that moment, all the happiness in Victor's life was completely shattered. His beloved bride, the companion of his childhood, and the hope of his future, was dead by the monster's hand. Suddenly, outside the window, Victor heard that awful laughter again, low and filled with cruel triumph. He looked up, eyes burning with rage and tears. In the garden, illuminated by a flash of lightning, stood the creature. Its face bore a grin of savage delight as it gazed at Victor. It seemed to be reveling in Victor's despair. Transformed by fury, Victor snatched his pistol and fired. The shot rang out. In the bright flash of gunpowder, Victor saw the creature turn and flee, unharmed. The bullet missed its target, and the demon vanished into the dark, rainy night, its laughter lingering like a curse in the air. Victor fell to his knees beside Elizabeth's bed, sobbing uncontrollably. Servants, awakened by the gunshot and commotion, came rushing in with candles. They cried out in horror at the sight. The beautiful young mistress, lifeless, and the master in a state of utter collapse. Victor was incoherent with grief and rage. He kept calling Elizabeth's name, begging her to wake up. begging God to reverse what had happened. But Elizabeth Frankenstein was gone forever. The next few days were a blur of agony for the Frankenstein family. When Alphonse Frankenstein learned of Elizabeth's murder, and on her wedding night, his late wife's dearest wish turned into such horror, he could not withstand the shock. His health, already worn by years and sorrow, gave out. Alphonse died a few days after Elizabeth, his heart quite literally broken by the cumulative tragedies that had befallen his family. Now Victor found himself utterly alone in the world. His little brother, his best friend, his wife, and even his father all gone. Each life had been taken or destroyed by the creature he had created. There was nothing left but revenge. Any remaining hesitation or compassion in Victor's heart burned away, turned to ash by his losses. At the same time, the creature's horrific revenge was complete. Everything Victor cared about had been destroyed. So, what did the monster have left to live for, except to torment Victor further? On the night of his father's funeral, Victor visited the cemetery. The wind howled, and the graves of his loved ones lay cold beneath his feet. In a wild, grief-stricken voice, Victor swore an oath. He would pursue the creature to the ends of the earth, and not rest until one of them was dead. As if in answer, he heard a distant, demonic laugh echo through the darkness of the graveyard. The creature was there, unseen, gloating over Victor's misery. Enraged, Victor shouted into the night that its time would come. The creature's response floated through the trees. "Yes, follow me. You'll find only despair." From that moment on, Victor lived for one purpose: to destroy his creation. He went to the local magistrate, a man named Magistrate Kerwin, and told him the whole shocking story about the creature, about the murders, everything. The magistrate listened with polite skepticism. A tale of a giant, fast, super-strong inhuman being? It sounded fantastical. Although Kerwin sympathized with Victor's obvious suffering, he doubted the parts about the creature's supernatural abilities. In the end, Victor realized no human law or authority could help him. If this fiend was to be stopped, Victor would have to do it himself. Thus began a relentless chase. The very night after Elizabeth's funeral, Victor packed some weapons and supplies and left Geneva. He sensed that the creature would not hide from him, that in fact, it delighted in drawing Victor on. Sure enough, as Victor traveled north, he would occasionally find clues left by the creature. Messages scratched into tree bark or carved on stones, taunting him, urging him to continue. Once, in the woods, he found on a tree trunk the words, "Follow me," carved deep, and on another occasion, a note weighted down with a rock that read, "You will find me, but only in death." These were written in French, showing the creature had learned to read and write during its time observing the de Lacy family. The creature seemed always just out of reach. It moved at incredible speeds, never pausing for long, whereas Victor, a mortal man weakened by trauma, had to rest occasionally. Still, the fiery drive of revenge sustained him beyond normal limits. He trekked through villages and wilderness, always heading north. Sometimes he would hear from terrified locals about a huge, awful figure that had been seen stealing food or trudging across the land. The creature even left direct gifts for Victor to keep him from giving up the pursuit. He would find remnants of food or a fire still warm, indicating the creature had camped there shortly before, almost as if making sure Victor could continue and not perish from exposure. From Switzerland into France, from France into the colder terrains of northern Europe, the chase went on. Then into the vast plains of Russia, Victor followed. He obtained a dog sled and fur clothing to cross the snowy expanses as the creature headed toward the Arctic. Across frozen rivers and snowy forests, always northward, they went. Many times Victor barely survived the harsh conditions only. His burning hatred kept him warm. In those desolate travels, sometimes he would see the creature at a great distance, an outline moving fast across a white plain or cresting a hill only to disappear on the other side. Each sighting renewed Victor's resolve. Finally, the chase led on to the ice-covered ocean itself. Far in the Arctic Circle, Victor found himself driving a sled team across vast sheets of ice, pursuing a dark speck on the horizon, that speck being the creature on its own sled. The weather was brutal, numbing cold, blinding snow, treacherous cracks in the ice. Still, neither pursuer nor pursued gave up. On one occasion, Victor came very close. He was perhaps only half a mile behind on the ice field, but then a sudden break in the ice separated them. The creature stood on an iceberg on the far side of a widening channel of freezing seawater, gazing at Victor. Victor, stranded on his own ice floe, cursed and screamed in frustration. The creature uttered something, perhaps a farewell or a taunt, and vanished into the white distance as a storm picked up, obscuring everything. It was at this desperate juncture that fate intervened in the form of Robert Walton and his exploration ship. Walton, a sea captain and a man of great ambition himself, had set out with a crew to find a new passage through the Arctic and achieve glory by reaching the North Pole. His ship had become trapped in the ice far north of Russia. One day, his crew spotted an astonishing sight, a giant of a man on a dog sled speeding across the ice far off. That, we know, was the creature. A day later, they encountered another sled on a drifting ice floe, carrying a nearly frozen, emaciated man, Victor Frankenstein. Walton's crew rescued Victor and brought him aboard. Under Walton's care, Victor slowly recovered just enough to relate his incredible story. In Walton's cabin, by the warmth of a fire and wrapped in blankets, Victor poured out the tale of his life, the horror of his creation, and the destruction that followed. Walton, mesmerized and deeply moved by this tale of genius and ruin, recorded much of it in letters to his sister. Walton found himself struck by the many lessons in Victor's story about ambition, responsibility, and the need for companionship. Victor, however, was now at the end of his strength. He knew he was dying. Though Walton urged him to rest and regain his health, Victor felt the icy hand of death approach. He used his remaining hours to implore Walton to continue the quest if he could. "I have failed," Victor whispered from his sickbed, Walton by his side. "I have chased the demon to these ends of the earth, yet I have not destroyed him. If I die, swear to me, Walton, that you will not let him escape, that you will, if opportunity presents, finish my task for me. Though, I fear, he may die by his own means when he has nothing left to hate." Walton gently agreed to do all he could, though in truth his ship was in no condition to chase anything at that moment, still being stuck in ice. Shortly after, Victor Frankenstein died on the ship, utterly spent by his long suffering and exhaustion. Walton, saddened and respectful, ordered that the body be placed in a cabin until the ice freed them to conduct a proper burial at sea or return home. Late one night, not long after Victor's death, Walton couldn't sleep. A strange unease filled the ship. The crew was mostly asleep, huddled below decks as the ship lay trapped in frozen silence. Walton decided to check on Victor's body. Approaching the makeshift coffin lit by a lone lantern, Walton heard an odd sound, like someone sobbing, coming from the cabin. Cautiously, he pushed open the door. To his astonishment, he beheld the creature, the very being of Victor's tales, looming over Victor's body. The monster's once dreadful face bore an expression of utter grief. It was weeping. Walton gasped, and the creature turned to him. In that moment, Walton felt a mix of terror and pity. The creature's eyes were full of sorrow, and tears glistened on its ugly cheeks. Walton held up his lantern, handshaking. The creature regarded him without hostility. In a broken, almost pleading voice, the creature spoke. "He's dead, my poor creator. the only person with whom I had any tie on this earth, and he is gone." It glanced back at Victor's still form. "I inflicted misery on him and on others, and now—" The creature let out a shuddering sigh. "Now he is at peace, and I remain in agony." Walton, recovering from shock, mustered the courage to respond. "You are the creature of Frankenstein's story." "I am," it replied. It looked down at Victor. "You call me monster, demon, wretch. I cannot deny it. I have done horrible things, but believe me, I once had goodness in me. Had Frankenstein given me even a small share of the love that a father owes his child, none of this would have happened." The creature gently touched Victor's coffin, an almost affectionate gesture. "Still, I wronged him terribly. I took from him everyone he loved. I can't justify that, only explain it. I was anguished and revengeful because he created me in isolation and refused me any happiness. But it is over now, over." Walton listened in silence. He saw before him not an inhuman demon, but a tortured being. The creature continued, "Now that my creator is dead, I have no reason to continue living. My heart is broken, and my crimes have caught up to me in my conscience. I intend to end my life. I came to say goodbye to him and to ask his forgiveness, though he cannot answer." The creature turned its gaze to Walton. "Do not worry. I will not harm you or your men. I have no anger for you. You have never harmed me. Frankenstein was the cause of my misery, and I was the cause of his. With him gone, I have only my own misery left, and that shall end soon too." Walton felt a tear roll down his cheek. The tragedy of both creator and creation moved him profoundly. He tried to speak words of comforter, perhaps of religion, but the creature slowly shook its head. "Save your words, good sir. I've had enough of words. My deeds are done, and now I go to my dark rest. I will go far to the north, build myself a funeral pyre on an ice floe, and embrace the flames. My ashes will scatter in the sea wind. That will be the end of the hideous existence of the monster that was Frankenstein's creation." Before Walton could say anything else, the creature gave one last, mournful look at Victor's body. "Farewell, Frankenstein," it whispered. "Farewell. I am sorry. I am sorry." It then turned to Walton, and with a faint nod of respect, it swiftly moved towards the open window of the cabin. In one bound, the creature leapt out into the dark, icy night. Walton rushed to the window and peered out into the gloom. He saw the tall, shadowy figure land on the frozen sea and stride away with supernatural swiftness. In moments, it was lost from sight in the Arctic darkness. Walton never saw the creature again, nor did anyone else. True to its word, the monster vanished forever, likely carrying out its plan to end its own life shortly after. A few days later, the sea ice around Walton's ship broke apart enough for the crew to turn back south. Walton abandoned his ambition to reach the North Pole. The lessons of Victor Frankenstein's life were not lost on him. As the ship made its way home, Walton reflected on the sorrowful tale he had witnessed, the story of a brilliant man destroyed by his own creation, and of a creature born innocent but turned evil by loneliness and cruelty. It was a story of reckless ambition and its terrible cost, of the deep need for love and the devastating effect of its absence. Victor Frankenstein's fate and that of his creature serve as a haunting reminder. In the end, both creator and creation were lost, each a mirror to the other's suffering. Victor's great ambition brought forth a being he could not control, and the creature's yearning for companionship turned to rage when met only with hatred. Both suffered utterly and caused suffering in turn. And so, the Arctic wind carried away the last whispers of the monster, and the gentle lapping waves of the sea closed over Victor Frankenstein's tragic life. The tale ends in sorrow and silence, with lessons painfully learned. That love and responsibility, if denied, can yield only despair. and that we must be careful what we create, for the things we bring into this world can destroy us if we do not take care.